Okay, awesome. We are live. So I'll start sharing my screen and we will get going here. Sweet. All right. Welcome everybody to the student chapter of the Wildlife Society's general member meeting. Thanks for coming today. So to get started here, we're going to talk about dues. So if you guys want to go out on projects or any volunteer on any of the things we're doing, you're going to have to pay dues this year. You can pay $5 for the semester or $8 a year. There's two ways to pay that. There's the online method through PayPal using my email there highlighted, or you can drop off some cash on Mondays from 10 to 2, it's my office hour. But if you use the PayPal, make sure to use friends and family so that you guys don't get charged a fee. If you have questions, Brylan, myself, or Melinda, happy to answer those for you.
So along with dues, there's two other things we need from you to go out on projects. So there's a just general membership form, so we know that you want to be a member. And then there's dues, which Nate just talked about, and then hold harmless forms. And hold harmlesses got sent out in an email from me a few weeks ago. If you cannot find that email, shoot me an email and I will send you the form. You can fill it out. It's just a PDF. You can fill it out with Adobe Reader, or you can print it out and take a picture and send me a picture. That works too. But when you email it back to me, please put your full name in the document title and make the subject line of your email TWS Hold Harmless. That would be super helpful. I do have a decent number of people who have all of the required things in, but there are some people who have just dues or just Hold Harmlesses. So try to get me both of them because you need both of them to go out on projects. So, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Melinda. Lizzie.
All right, so today we will be finding out if corvids can get COVID, which they can't, just a sneak peek, but animals can get COVID. And we see this a lot in pets, mainly cats and dogs. But things have been popping up where we're also seeing wildlife can be getting COVID, which is kind of crazy. It shows that, like, you know, we always hear about these diseases that animals can give to people. Well, now people are giving COVID to animals, and it's not really looking good for a lot of populations. So there's this one study that analyzed 25 different genes that code for proteins of the ACE2 receptor. And this is the receptor that COVID couples with and to like help jumpstart its life cycle. So they were analyzing these genes to see like which animals were most at risk for catching COVID. And you can see this nice little diagram here on the slide. It shows kind of like the risk. Obviously, animals that are more similar to people and also like have more genes that code for these proteins for the ACE2 receptor, they're the ones more likely to get COVID. But have been examples of like specific animals that have gotten COVID on top of dogs and cats. There's a 4-year-old Bronx zoo tiger that tested positive for COVID and was coughing and like all the stereotypical signs of COVID. And then there's also been mink farms in Utah and Wisconsin that have had outbreaks, and they're trying to decide what to do. Just like, you know, are they supposed to call all these individuals so that they don't spread it to other things, other wildlife? But birds, including our corvids, and reptiles aren't as likely to get it just because they're less similar to people. They have less genes that are producing these proteins. So that's just kind of a breakdown on what can get it, what's more likely, what's not. So what can you guys do? It's kind of the same as with people. The Wildlife Society is recommending that we wear masks whenever we're handling wildlife, no matter what it is, just to reduce that likelihood of them catching it. Limit contact as much as you can. I know in our field that's kind of challenging since we're literally handling the animals, but you know, if you're out in the wild and don't need to be handling animals, then like would recommend not to, just to reduce that risk. So yeah, just following the same guidelines as you do for interacting with other human beings. With that, we can move on to our quiz bowl. based on kind of that chart that I showed you before, which of these animals is the least likely to catch COVID? We have white-tailed deer, Siberian tigers. Oh, I realize now I forgot to take correct out of the answer, but you guys are going to be so smart and figure it out. And African elephants. So yes, it's alligator. That is my bad. But you know what? I trust that you guys would have gotten it correct anyway, just because you're all so smart. But you can check out these photos I found of animals sneezing that I thought was very amusing. So
Awesome. Thank you, Lizzie. All righty, guys. So the Wildlife Health Seminar Series is still on. These are free seminars put on by the Stevens Point. And the next one's coming up here, I believe, on that would be Thursday again. And that's COVID and the nature of disease emergence. So should be a super cool talk. And then there's another one the Thursday after. So check those out. So a new thing that we're doing is a student job series. So if you guys would like to present your summer work, an internship that you had, let me know. So we're going to take up 2 meetings this year. That would be on 11/24 and then December 1st. So that's not next week, but the week after, and then the week after that. And we're going to let 3 students highlight their summer work and or internship. And that's our meeting, what our meeting is going to be. So if you're interested, let me know. The presentations only need to be about 8 to 10 minutes. So it should be pretty cool. I'll stick around at the end of the meeting if you guys have questions about this. Otherwise, if you're interested, you can ask me any questions afterwards as well.
So like I mentioned last week, we'll be putting together the big budget for next year, but we need to know how much money projects are going to be wanting. So you guys should all have that email and that form. I've gotten several budgets back so far, so that's good. These forms will be due on Friday, so the 13th at midnight. So make sure you get those to me. And if you do not submit a budget, you will not be allotted funds for next year. If you have any questions, you can just email me about that. And then if you have travel money for your project that you're not planning on using, and you could use it for equipment or other maintenance, we can do a line item change. So that would be moving your travel money into the equipment funds, so then you could buy things with that money. If you think you might want to do this, you can email me with the amount that you want to transfer, and I can move the money eventually here. You can request this line item change by Monday, November 30th at midnight, and then we'll get your money available for you to buy some equipment. So you can also email me if you have any questions about that.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian.
Hi everyone. Tomorrow is Senior Bible Study, and it's just a group of Natural Resource members coming together to learn more about the Bible. Currently, we're going through topics and videos done by an animation studio called the Bible Project, and they're really fun videos to watch, and they do a good job of also looking at like historical facts and using that in their video. And so the Zoom link is there on the slide, and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me or Megan, and our emails are there on the slide.
Awesome. Thank you, Melina.
Hey everyone, so I'm just here again to remind you that the Waterfall Project is still accepting applications for co-leaders. It's a great way to get experience, get your foot in the door. We encourage everyone who is interested to apply. And you can send those applications or any questions that you have about the project or about the co-leader position to either me or Victoria at the emails below. And those are going to be due by November 27th at midnight.
Awesome. Thank you, Aiden. Sawwet.
Hey guys, so we closed our applications last weekend. So we will have results back for who we choose after the interviews this week.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. AWA.
So the Adopt a Wildlife Area project is going to be having a work day on this Sunday, November 15th. We'll probably be out from 9 o'clock to 2-ish. So if you want to come out with us, we'll be working at the Buena Vista Wildlife Area, cutting brush and applying herbicide to some invasive species on the grassland. You do not have to have any experience. We can show you how to work equipment out there. If you have your chainsaw certs, that's really great. The one thing is that transportation may or may not be available. So due to, COVID restrictions, like I could take one person, but if there's more than that, then it would be awesome if you guys could drive yourself. We're not going to be going anywhere that's really muddy that you need a big truck to drive around. So we'll be meeting at Lot E, which is West TNR at 9 a.m. and then we'll all drive over to the site. I'll send out a Google Sheet at the end of the meeting and you guys can sign up on there. So due to maybe some restrictions with travel, we will determine who gets to go out on a first come, first served basis. So please look at that after the meeting, and eventually at the end of the week, I'll send out a confirmation email to people if we can take people out. So if there's any questions anybody has, you can ask them right now or email me.
Awesome. Thank you, Brylan. Shelby.
Hello, everyone. So every Friday, we feature a wildlife photo taken by one of our members on our Instagram and Facebook page for what we call Fauna Friday. So if you have any cool wildlife photos that you've taken recently or in the past, you can send them in by DMing our Instagram page or by emailing me. And then you can follow our student chapter on multiple platforms. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, or even add us on Snapchat with the code up on the slide. If you ever miss a meeting, our meetings are recorded and you can find those recordings on our website and our YouTube channel.
Awesome. Thank you, Shelby. So that is it for announcements this week. Next week, we have Robert Holzman coming in from the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, the Human Dimensions sector. He has a long career in natural resources, tons of different perspectives, so it should be a super cool talk. Excited for that one, but without further ado, this week we have Sarah Johnson with us, who's an animal ambassador keeper at Lincoln Children's Zoo in Nebraska. So, Sarah, I will stop my share, and the rest of the time is yours.
Alrighty, sounds good. Let me go ahead and get my screen shared with all of you for my quick, well, I won't say quick, but a presentation. So to go ahead and further introduce myself, my name is Sarah Johansson, and I am an animal ambassador keeper, as already stated, at the Lincoln Children's Zoo. I do have a 13-week-old puppy, so if you keep hearing squeaky toys in the background, that's what's going on there. So I do apologize for any background noise distractions. But to start today's presentation, before going into my topic, I wanted to go ahead and take a little walk down memory lane with all of you, just to put some context into who I am and how I relate to UWSP. So when I was in school from 2012 through December of 2016, was very involved with TWS. I was the education coordinator for the year. I was a co-leader of the Saw What Owl project. My face ended up on the cover of the Wildlife Professional, if any of you have seen that hanging around the TNR. And then circa 2015, in Riddle We Trust, those buttons still do exist with a lot of different wildlife members from the past. So if none of you have seen that button before, I wanted to share it with you today. So I was a big part of the student chapter getting recognized for Student Chapter of the Year back in 2015, 2016, and it's my understanding you all got that award again in 2018, 2019, so congratulations. I'm glad I made a really good solid base for you to go ahead and win that award again. So I graduated from UWSP, like I said, in the fall of 2016. So if any of you have been at Stevens Point for 4 years and 1 semester, you would have been freshmen my last year at Point. So since being at Point, now 4 years later, as already mentioned, I am an animal ambassador keeper at the Lincoln Children's Zoo. So I go ahead and I get to go out and do a bunch of educational programs, working with a wide variety of animals, from snakes to guinea pigs and cheetahs, and just a whole bunch of different species. So today's presentation is going to kind of focus on what happened in between graduating in 2016 and making it finally to my dream job as an animal ambassador keeper, which was grad school. So I'm doing my master's thesis research with you, which is entitled Empathy and its Role in Education and Conservation Action Among Zoo Guests. So this is a 2-chapter thesis. So basically I have 2 different topics. So you can think of it as 2 separate research projects that are related to one another. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So to go ahead and start out here, 1 second. Can you take the dog out, babe? She's a small dog, but she's getting really playful and really feisty right now. Anyway, so feelings of empathy. She had to make an appearance. Alrighty, so feelings of empathy. So what exactly is empathy? Empathy is a simulated emotional state that relies on the ability to perceive, understand, and care about the experiences or perspectives of another. So it's different from other emotions like sympathy, in that if you're sympathetic towards something, you're gonna be like, oh, like that's really sad, like I feel for you. But if you're empathetic, you're gonna be like, oh my gosh, like the dog died in the movie and I'm gonna bawl my eyes out. So empathy basically means you're making yourself vulnerable to those emotions. You're allowing yourself to feel what someone else is feeling. And empathy develops over time and in multiple frameworks. So there's empathy with human-to-human interactions, animal-to-animal interactions, and then also human-to-animal interactions. And so how does empathy work? So basically in our brains, we have all these different neural passageways. So when we're a child, we have billions of these passageways. And as we grow older, some of these passageways start to disappear and they start to die off. So think of it like a trail in the woods. If you are constantly hiking along the same trail, eventually you're going to wear a path, and a path is going to form that's going to be easily recognizable and seen. So the more you practice empathy as a kid, the more you're using those pathways, the stronger they're going to become. So if you don't use it, you lose it. So if you stop using the trail in the woods, eventually the plants are going to overgrow it and that pathway is going to disappear. So empathy is a practice. We need to reinforce it within our brains to be able then to feel it when we're experiencing the world around us. Now, that's not to say an adult can't learn empathy, but it is much easier as a child to go ahead and pick up on that understanding. So when we are trying to create empathy or an experience with a zoo guest, you might think, okay, so we have all these animals at a zoo. We're going to have people come to the zoo to see the animals. We're going to dabble in some empathy to that equation, and bam, this is going to result in conservation action. This is what is going to want people to be able to go ahead and conserve these species. Well, then the other side of that equation is we have to ask ourselves, well, why do people even bother going to a zoo in the first place? Like, what's the whole point of it all? So Dr. Falk actually did a study in 2007 where he developed these visitor identity models. So basically, hey, we can actually categorize people going to the zoo into these 5 different categories based off of what they want to get out of the experience. Are they going to the zoo as like a spiritual pilgrim, like looking for kind of like a spiritual experience, like feeling a connection? Or are they a facilitator? You know, they're the caretaker, the bus driver, the school teacher, bringing that class on a field trip. They're facilitating an experience. So all these different kinds of people are utilizing zoo entities. So we have non-dominant, meaning people don't fall into one of the categories. Professional, hobbyists, explorers, rechargers, experience seekers, and facilitators. So basically, people can get categorized in these different ways. So besides Falk's identity model and all these different visitor experiences that they can go ahead and have. So when you're going to a zoo, you could have your typical day, you just want to go see some animals. It might be zoo lights, it might be boo at the zoo, brew at the zoo, you know, 21 plus events. It might be a birthday party. Like there's all these different reasons why people are going to the zoo as well. So that's going to impact then, you know, one trip a person might be a facilitator going to the zoo, but another trip then they might become a professional hobbyist or they might become an experience seeker. So it's kind of all depending on what their goals are for the day. And so then you also have to think about, okay, zoos have a mission statement or have goals to be centers of education, to provide conservation actions, and all of this has to align then with the visitors' goals of what they want to go ahead and accomplish. So rather than this really simple equation of animals and people plus empathy is going to create conservation action for these species in the wild, well, we do have animals, but we also have charismatic versus uncharismatic species. You have cultural stigmas attached to certain animal species. Then you can add in the zoo guests. And so they're going to fall into one of the 5 visitor categories. You have different ages, different cultures, different background information of what these people may or may not already know about the animals. And then you're trying to make these fun, memorable experiences happen. And then you're going to try to evoke empathy in these programs that we're providing. And then maybe conservation might happen at the end of the day. So it's actually very complicated. So leading into that, Chapter 1 of my thesis is encouraging empathy in one-on-one animal encounter programs with uncharismatic species. So a little background information. You're going to go to the zoo. There are multiple one-on-one encounter experiences that you could go ahead and have when you go to the zoo, whether it's feeding a giraffe from the feeding deck, an up-close personal encounter with an animal, a behind-the-scenes tour, all different kinds of programs. So when it comes to these different programs, a zoo might offer a program for each of these species that you see pictured here. But a visitor might more likely choose to do that giraffe feeding deck feeding or encounter experience. You know, it's like $5 for a bushel of lettuce versus paying $300 to go behind the scenes in the tiger building. So there are costs that impact the types and kinds of people and what animals they could actually have a connection with. And obviously, if you have those crazy sloth lovers out there, there's a world full of them. I did a sloth encounter for a lady, and as soon as the sloth came out, she burst into tears because she was so amazed at the sloth. Like, yeah, she's going to be willing to pay $300, $400 to do that. A family that might be from a more rural area, a family from like a lower income household, things like that, that's going to impact their ability to have those experiences. And some visitors are going to choose the cool, fluffy, charismatic tiger, sloth animal versus the rat, the snake, the frog, the insect, those kinds of things. All right. And then one final piece of this background information puzzle, typically when you do a zoo program, you're going to present about an animal, and then the zookeeper or the presenter always talks about, hey, this is a conservation action step. This is something that you can do at home to help this animal. Well, if you're a zoo and your conservation action step, for example, is telling people to reduce, reuse, recycle, but you live in a community where they physically cannot get their recycling picked up, all you're doing is creating a feeling of helplessness. You're creating an experience where this kid just learned, I need to recycle to save my favorite animal, but there is no recycling truck to pick up my recycling. I have to throw my recycling in the trash because that's my only option. Fun fact, the state of West Virginia does not recycle. They physically can't. They have to bring everything over to Ohio, as I lived there. So even though we think it's so easy access where we are, there are other places in our own country where it's such a difficult thing just to recycle paper. You wouldn't believe it. All right, so for this chapter of my research, everything was reviewed by an institutional review board since I was associated with the university. So basically what I did was I had a one-on-one animal encounter experience with 3 different animals from the zoo science collection. So a little background information from my program. So I went to school for grad school at West Liberty University, which is in West Virginia. We have 200 animals on campus that people can go ahead and take care of. There is a master's program, and I was one of the first 3 people to do that program. And then there's also an undergraduate major as well. So kids can come, or people in the program can gain hands-on experience caring for the animals on campus, and we're 15 minutes away from an AZA accredited zoo, so you can do internships and get experience working with the animals there as well. And then for the encounter, each participant got about 7 to 10 minutes with each of my 3 animals. So I set up a booth basically in our student union to gather participants being like, hey, I'm doing a random drawing. You can enter to win a behind the scenes experience with the sloth for free, and then 2 mystery animals. So I did not reveal what the 2 animals, the other 2 animals would be. So obviously they get to meet Sweet Pea, the 2-toed sloth, but then they got to meet one of 3 lizard species. So either our bearded dragon Iro, Zippy, our blue-tongued skink, or Steve, our spiny-tailed monitor, or then the 3rd animal being one of our snakes. So we had Samantha, our carpet python, and then Sia, our black-tailed karibo. So the reason why we had like multiple snakes and multiple reptile or multiple lizards, obviously if a snake is in shed, I can't handle it for a program, so we had a backup. So that's where that's coming from. So in my data collection, I collected demographic information of all my participants. I had them take Falk's visitor model survey to see, are there certain people who would come to the zoo for an education program or an animal encounter experience going to fall into one of those 5 categories. I took pre and post experience data to see changes in opinion based on how did you feel about the sloth before meeting one. Now that you have, has your expectations changed? And then I also looked for observational empathy. So I had a research assistant who was observing every single interaction all my participants had with the animal they were meeting, just to kind of go ahead and see, if there was a moment in the program where the person was like touching the sloth or touching the snake and like having some kind of empathy experience occurring, but then in their surveys that the actual participant would be taking after the fact, them being like, nah, the snake was lame, even though during the encounter, I watched them be like, oh my gosh, it's so cool. So that's what that data set was looking at. So for my results, so for Falk's visitor model, I ended up having 42 participants. I was able to analyze, there we go, that's the word I was looking for. So as you can see, 78% of my participants ended up falling into the non-dominant category, which is not what I was expecting. 10% ended up being professional hobbyists, 7% were explorers, and 5% were rechargers. So experience seekers and facilitators didn't show up in the data set at all. So facilitators, that makes sense. This is an experience happening on a college campus as if it were at like a zoo because we have the animals on campus. So there's not really anybody facilitating a field trip, driving a school bus, bringing people to an experience. But the experience seekers, this is an experience. So someone seeking a cool experience, they're going to want to go to a zoo for an experience. So the fact that that didn't come up at all was really surprising. And so what I actually figured out was that is due to something known as codominance. So the pie chart on the left from the 2007 original study, you can see roughly 50% of the participants fell into the non-dominant category. So hypothetically, 50% of my participants should have been non-dominant, and I should have been able to categorize everybody else. So what I think then happened is this co-dominant situation. So since 2007, Falk has reimagined and redone his visitor model to account for the fact, hey, a person coming to the zoo, they may be a facilitator, like providing a field trip experience, but they also might be an experience seeker because the whole field trip is going to go ahead and do and watch a stage program by whatever keeper or by whatever entity at the zoo. Someone who might be looking for a spiritual experience may still go ahead then and go behind the scenes and visit an animal. So I'm thinking what ended up happening is there's co-dominance going on. So my experience seekers ended up having similar traits to one of the other 5 categories, but because I was using an older model, I wasn't able to distinguish those different groups, so they all ended up coming up as non-dominant. So if this study or a method similar to this study were to be redone, I would highly recommend using the 2011 version of Falk's visitor model. I had already started data collection when I discovered that paper and that other model, so I wasn't able to use it for my study. All right, so then looking at the encounter experiences, so I have pre and post data for a couple different categories. So I went ahead and I had participants look at different animal groups. So I used a Wilcoxon paired rank test, which is a non-parametric statistic due to the Likert scale nature of the data, and the standard alpha was used. So I asked basically on a scale of 1 to 5, rate the following statement. So this example, mammals are a special group of animals that deserve to be conserved and protected. So I did this, I said mammals, I said birds, reptiles, and insects. So hypothetically, in my encounter experience, they met mammals and they met reptiles. So those would be the 2 categories that I would expect then a change in the pre and post data. But instead, what I found was significance with mammals and with insects. And so what I think ended up happening here was because I had a standardized program that I did for every single encounter. So for every single animal, I said their name. Every single animal got to be touched by the participant. I talked about their habitat, their home range, what they ate. So I had a set educational framework for every single participant for the study. So one of my facts that I said about our sloth that they met is they actually in the wild can grow green fur, and there are different moth species that live in the fur of sloths, and they kind of form this this micro community, if you want to word it that way. So people picked up on the fact, hey, sloths are cool animals and they have insects living in their fur, so that makes insects really important. So it's a prime example of how you can use a charismatic animal to cause feelings of empathy for an uncharismatic species and therefore generate conservation action towards uncharismatic animals in this instance. So that was the goal of this study, not for insects, but for reptiles as my 2 mystery animals, as people are afraid of lizards or afraid of snakes and maybe not want to go ahead and meet one-on-one. So the sloth was the draw-in to get them to meet the uncharismatic animals. But this was a happy accident within the study. So another similar pre and post data set. So I went ahead and asked participants, are sloths a type of animal that should be conserved and protected? Are lizards, are snakes? And it was across all 3 animal species. So people were like, yes, these animals should be conserved. They're really, really cool. So what gets more interesting is when we dive a little bit more into the data set. So when people saw the sloth, so the bar on the left is pre-data and the bar on the right is post-data. So since it was a Likert scale, I went ahead and I averaged all of the 1s, 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s. So that's where that number in parentheses come from. So when the pre-data for sloth, people said, oh, I really like the sloth, and that averaged to be like 4.39. And they still liked the sloth afterwards with a slight increase to 4.81. And you can see that in the bar graphs. It gets even better when we look at the lizards and when we look at snakes. So for lizards, we went from a neutral rating to a like rating. And then for snakes, we even see a higher increase. So not a lot of people like snakes before the encounter experience, but a lot more people like snakes afterwards. And you can even see for my error bars, so you can see how there's this wide variation in the pre-data. So some people gave snakes a 5, some people gave snakes a 1. So there is a wide group, but it shrinks significantly. So a lot more 3, 4s, and 5s after meeting a snake one-on-one. So when people have an open mind to meet an animal up close and personal, we can generate feelings of empathy for what could be seen as an uncharismatic animal. So here is just all of those bar graphs in one chart, so you can go ahead and get a better idea of that comparison. So then I went ahead and for my program, I offered a conservation action step for every single animal that I presented on, just to see if people were more keen on doing the conservation action step for the animal, or if it was where, oh, this conservation action step of turning off the thermostat when I'm not home, or like turning off the faucet while I brush my teeth is just easier to achieve than like giving up 1 beef meal per month because we like our meat and potatoes too much. So basically there was a point system. So if every single animal got like a low rating, then they would have a total score of 41. A middle rating of all 2s would have been 82. And then if they all got like the highest rating of like, yes, I'm most likely going to do this conservation action step, it would have been 123. So when we look at the data, everybody ended up falling into the middle range. So the red bar would have been the low, yellow bar is for the mid-range, and then the green bar would be for the high. So the sloth had a score of 89, the lizard a score of 79, and the snake a score of 81. So middle ground for everybody when it came to actually completing the conservation action step. And then, so really cool here. So I had a lot of different short answer responses for my data set. So I asked people like, oh, what was your favorite fact that you learned today? Or what was like something really cool about your experience? So when we go ahead and looked at those responses, because they're short answer and written out, they were very simple to very complex. And there was a lot of people talking about empathy. Oh, the animal has a unique personality, making it an individual. It was really, really cool to go ahead and observe that. So if you look here, so this blue bar, so that's for the sloth. So 37% of people mentioned the sloth in their short answer response of what was their favorite fact of what they'd learned today. 9 people just mentioned the lizard. 30% mentioned the snake, and then 23% mentioned general conservation or conserving all 3 species. If we look at this chart here, though, this bar graph, this is asking people, what was your favorite animal that you met today? So 81% of people said the sloth was their favorite, but then when asked, what did you learn? Only 37% of people listed something about the sloth. So there was this huge disconnect. And then, as I mentioned, from those simple to complex answers, I started seeing trends where when people mention the sloth, it's like, oh, why was the sloth your favorite animal? Or like, what did you learn today? The sloth was cute. She was soft. She likes to eat sweet potatoes. But then when we look at responses for the snake and responses for the lizard, it was like, oh my gosh, Sia is such an individual. She has this unique personality as a snake. Like, I never thought snakes could be this cool. Like, I had paragraphs rather than these short, sweet, 1-line answer questions. So that was really cool to see, like how much of a connection people were making more with this animal that they knew less about or were less inclined to go ahead and meet, versus the sloth, which was the draw-in, which is the big charismatic creature that everybody wanted to go ahead and see. So then when I was looking at my empathy observations, it was basically a human ethogram is a great way to describe it. So there were 34 different observations falling into 10 categories. So I averaged scores across all of the categories because some categories had like 4 different variables while other categories only had 2. And I excluded category 10 from analysis because basically it was looking at me as the facilitator and what I was doing during the presentation. And I can tell you that basically I did the same thing for every single presentation. So it was all the same and there was no significance there. So the top 3 categories for all 3 animals ended up being the same. So category 6, there was an interest or curiosity towards the animal, and that was the same for all 3. And then categories 8 and 7 flipped flop for the snake, I think is what it is. So category 8, animals as an individual with its own agency. Category 7, having appreciation and respect for the animal. So this is what people took away from the experience and what they portrayed during the experience, which was cool to see. Alrighty, so for my empathy observation, so people are aware of the connections that they are making during an educational experience. So it's not where they're like saying one thing to me as the educator, but then going home and being like, oh, this animal's dumb, this animal isn't cool, like I didn't have a good time. And again, those general trends of like, what was the favorite thing that you learned today? So it was either a fact and how it relates to personal experience or a moment and how they felt during that experience. So people are more likely to remember how they felt over what they learned. So think of that last vacation that you went on to that really cool restaurant where you had that really good, amazing burger. You can't taste that burger in your mouth anymore, but you know it was that good. So that's what educational experiences at zoos need to start being like. Because historically, with zoological experiences, it used to be where a keeper would have an animal and be like, this is an alligator, it lives here, this is what it eats, this is what it does. And you're fact spewing at people. And then they're like, oh, cool, but that's not what people remember. They don't remember the facts. They remember the moment. They remember that cool thing being like, I don't remember what I learned about that alligator, but I got to touch him and it felt like this and it was amazing. So as a zoo educator, that's what we need to start doing. Zookeeping is storytelling. So what are you experiencing and how it connects you to this animal in the wild? Because that moment is what's going to trigger someone then to be like, I need to go ahead and donate funds for conservation. I need to volunteer. I need to take that next step and do more for that species. And also that means that as a zoo, we need to start getting uncharismatic animals into the spotlight. Just because the sloth encounter that's $300 is going to be our moneymaker doesn't mean we can't do or we shouldn't do encounters with alligators, with snakes, with reptiles, with insects, with all of those animals that might be seen as scary. So as zookeepers, we are putting information into the world. We need to do science to make sure it's working. So obviously as wildlifers, like we know the importance of our science and what we need to do. So I will say like the Department of Natural Resources, the DNR, they're doing much better at science than zookeeping is right now, especially within the education world. So historically educating within the zookeeper world, you're gonna do a program. Is your program successful? I don't know, I'm just gonna do a program and then hope for the best. That's historically been the trend. It's been within the last 10, 15 years when now all of a sudden zoos are being like, hey, we should kind of analyze and see if when we do a program, people are taking away what our goal was from that program. So data analysis within zoo education is just starting to happen. And we're starting to see a trend now where as zookeepers, they want you to have experience with R, they want you to have experience with Excel, so then they can go ahead and analyze data in-house rather than having to hire outside entities. So the fact that I know how to do data is part of the reason why I finally got my dream job. So it's been a process. Alrighty, so with that, we're going to change gears a little bit and transition into chapter 2. So chapter 2 is entitled Social Media Representation of Animals and How It Influences Feelings of Empathy. So basically, social media, guys. So we have Facebook, we got our Instagram, there's the Twitter, there's the Snapchat, there's the Reddit, there's the TikTok, there's the YouTube. All these different things, we use them every single day, and they are influencing our lives and how information is being spread. Hashtag The Social Dilemma. Watch it on Netflix if you haven't yet. There's my plug. Okay, so basically social media, it's everywhere. We all consume it. We all use it. We are in a digital age. Zoos and aquariums use multiple communication means to connect with guests and potential guests. So what is a meme? Most of you should know what a meme is, but basically it's an image that has been spread rapidly across the internet to go ahead then and capture people's attention. Yes, I went to grad school and I researched memes. That's a thing, guys. You can do it too. So the yeah, that would be great meme. This is a prime example. So the punchline's the same. The first part of the meme is a little bit different. So meme is used for viral content. So you could have a meme that is a play on words. I'll be heading out now. You could see a meme like this, the dumb cat's, you know, he's stuck in the coat hanger. Oh man, that cat is now stuck in the blinds. And oh snap, that turtle does really require some assistance. So look at how powerful that experience just was for all of you right now. So it was something funny, and then all of a sudden your heart is breaking. We need to do something about this. So even if it's a meme and it's supposed to be this funny thing that we just scroll past on our phones, it can have impact in how people view wildlife. And as we all know, there's some dark places on the internet. So I literally Googled zoo memes, and these were 2 memes that came up. So as a zookeeper and a part of the zoological profession or a part of the wildlife profession, if people were to Google that, this is what they're finding. So yeah, it might be funny, but obviously this camel eating this child's head, like this is not an AZA accredited facility. Like that's not what happens at every single zoo. So we have to be mindful that people are consuming this, and this could actually change how they feel about our institutions or about what we're doing. So we do have to be really careful about what ends up on the internet. So my methodology for this research was I basically did a meme survey. So I had 5 different questions for different memes that I made in a PowerPoint format. So I had 10 different animals, basically covering 2 animals in each category. So I had 2 birds, 2 mammals, 2 aquatic species, 2 reptiles, and 2 insects. And then I created a positive and negative version of that meme and how it portrayed that species. And then when I showed these memes to different participants, I would tell some groups of people, hey, this was a meme that was pulled from the internet from an accredited AZA institution. So zoos that have like the highest standards of animal care versus this meme was just made by a content developer who's trying to get the most shares, who's trying to get something to go viral. So that's the premise then of this research. So let's go ahead and take a look at our meme cast. So these were all the different animals that were portrayed in the meme. So these were the actual images that I used. So a red panda and a tiger for my mammals. I had a Victorian crown pigeon and a penguin for birds. I had a clownfish and then a jellyfish for my aquatics category. For reptiles, I did a Nile crocodile and then a snake. And then for insects, I had a tarantula and I had a whip spider. So here's an example of my meme set. So some of you might remember in March of 2018, the unscience and animal trend that went around the internet. So the picture on the left is portraying the animal in a negative way. So here we have a spider and everything is labeled, nope, 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 nope. I want nothing to do with that spider. Spiders are gross, spiders are icky, no. Whereas in the image on the right, we have the fuzz bum region, the blinkies, the num num wigglers, the tappity taps, all of these very cutesy terms where all of a sudden it's like, oh, he's a cute little spider, like maybe I might like him. So you can see how these 2 different memes change your opinion about those animals. And so that is very impactful. So it means something. So here's another example. So the negative meme, again, being on the left. So the wasp sting of the ocean. We all know that jellyfish sting and it hurts, so it's like a wasp. Or the one on the right, elegant sea ballerina. They're beautiful, they're graceful. So both of these are true, like playing off of what this animal does, but at the same time, one is making it seem negative or bad, the other one is making it seem like beautiful, elegant, good. So differences. All right. So again, 4 different result categories. I looked at demographic information of my participants, animals in the memes, positive versus negative connotations of the memes, and then the meme sources. So for my demographics, I had roughly 260 people take this survey. 95% were 18 to 22-year-olds. Most of them were freshmen. I went into a freshman level class, which did kind of skew my data a little bit because if you think about it, well, even though roughly half of my participants had science-based majors and the other half didn't, if you're a freshman, so an 18-year-old first semester of college, you basically have a high school education. Your college major hasn't influences your perception yet. So if I would have gone into a senior level class, then maybe whether you were a science-based major or not a science-based major would have influenced your different perceptions of the memes. But what was significant was the location of where the participants were from in regards to question 1. So question 1 of my survey was, how do you feel towards the animal in this image? So it was the baseline image. So the images you saw earlier for the meme cast, I would show that image first and then go ahead and show the meme version and then be like, okay, answer these questions about the meme. So that makes sense based off of where you grow up, you're gonna have different perceptions of different animals. So in Minnesota, Wisconsin, snakes are cool, snakes are reptiles. In West Virginia, no good snake, but a dead snake. Literally any person that you talk to, if you mention snake, they're like, it should die, it's awful. So you can see the regionality within the data set. So obviously I made all the memes, but I told people I pulled them from the internet. So memes are meant to be funny. So apparently I am a Facebook mom, cringe rate 10 out of 10. So what I find humorous and what I show other people, and they're like, yeah, that's funny, Sarah. Other people did not find funny. And that is the nature of memes on the internet. There's a reason why some go viral and some don't, or some go viral in certain circles of people and other ones go viral in other circles. So, but yeah, but they thought my animals were cute. So that was optimistic and nice. So basically for my statistical information, chi-squared test, I use the alpha of 0.001811 for Bonferrari's correction, which is basically saying like, okay, I have animals, I have sources, I have positive and negative things. There's all these compounding factors. So we wanted to make that alpha even smaller to make sure it was actually significant for what I was looking for versus significance because all of these things were compounding together. I also did a Kronkel mental Hensel test, which is basically a 3D chi-square test. So rather than just looking at one of these questions individually, like per animal, per source, I could look at all 3 or like a group of them. But basically, as you can see from the chart, none of them ended up being significant. And I think that's just because I only had 300 participants. And then I had people who saw positive versus negative versions of the same meme and were told different things about them. So that makes my data set or like my N even smaller. So that's what was going on there. And then I did a Wilcoxon paired rank test again because I had some Likert scale before and after data. All right, so as you can see, the animal was significant for all questions. So based off of what animal was in the meme impacted how people felt about it. The source of the meme was significant when looking at question 3 and question 5, and I'll explain more of what that means later. And then if the meme was positive or negative, it was significant in some instances, but not in all instances. So let's go ahead and look at some pretty bar graphs that I made in R. Question 2, so basically I was asking people, based off of the meme, would you be willing to see this animal in the wild versus based off of this meme for question 3, would you want to see this animal in a zoo? So for seeing the animal in the wild, well, you know, so all of these red bars are a response of 1. So we have snakes, we have tarantulas, we have the whip spiders. No one wants to see these animals in the wild. But then all of a sudden you go to, hey, let's see these animals in zoos. We start seeing more purple, the teal bars, which are all the neutrals, the likes, and the strongly likes. So people are more inclined to see an animal, whether it's scary or not, or have like a negative connotation associated with it in a zoological setting. So question 5 was asking people, would you, if you were told this animal was endangered, would you want to go ahead and conserve it? So basically everybody, response of 1, yes, we need to conserve all species. The only one that got iffy was the whip spider, where it was pretty 50-50. People are like, yeah, we should conserve him. People are like, nah, he's scary. So that's what's happening there. So here is another version of that same chart. So basically 93% of people were like, yes, red pandas, we need to conserve them. Ooh, 92% for clownfish. They're not scary, it's Nemo, right? 91% penguin, 91% for tiger. Our 3 lowest categories, 49% the whip spider, the tarantula, and then the snakes. So the uncharismatic animals are the ones where people are like, I don't know if we should conserve them or not. So basically, animals and memes, people have preconceived notions of animals. So the pandas, they're so fluffy, you're gonna love them. Snakes, you're gonna make a face like that. So our preconceived notions, or what we're taught as kids, is how we feel towards animals then as we grow older. But then when we looked at the positive or negative connotations of the memes, I found significance for when looking at seeing the animals in the wild or seeing them at a zoological setting. So I probably should have worded this question a little bit differently in my survey. I should have been like, would you rather, or like, how would you feel seeing this animal in its natural habitat versus wild? So wild, that word has a connotation of like, you're in the wild, you're unprotected. So seeing a tiger in the wild is obviously going to be a little bit more scary and being like, oh, this tiger could eat me, versus, oh, the tiger's behind the glass in the zoo. Heck yeah, I'm going to get really, really close and take cool selfies with it through the glass. So zoos have perceived safety. So people are going to be more inclined to connect with a scary animal in that setting than they're going to try to in the wild, because in the wild, they might not be safe depending on what kind of animal it is. So when it comes to the meme source, people, they're not looking at the source of where their memes are coming from, whether it's from a reliable like zoological Instagram account or someone just trying to make content go viral. And that's because of the clickbait and scroll culture that is social media. You know, you go on Facebook and it's like, oh, I'm only gonna check a few things, and then 10 minutes later, you're still scrolling with your thumb. And so you're going to see an image, double tap it to give it a like, and then you're gonna move on. You're not necessarily reading the comments or reading the caption that zoo has created for that post to be like, our fun fact of the day is this, or whatever it is. So when the source of the meme is being considered is when people are deciding if they're going to go ahead and see the animal in a zoo and if they want to go ahead and conserve it. So if it's an internet image of a cheetah, they might just go ahead and scroll past it. But then if it's like, oh, I'm going to go to the zoo and they're opening a brand new cheetah exhibit, I'm going to look up things about cheetahs online. And now all of a sudden, that's when the source material matters. So when it's impacting real life decisions, that's when it's important. So basically, in conclusion, meme context does impact how we view animals online. It builds upon our prior knowledge. So as zoological institutions or as wildlifers, because you all have your own social media account, we have to get creative in how we're going to get members of the general public to engage with and potentially want to conserve uncharismatic or scary animals. So we have to make sure that the memes and the information that we're putting out there is accurate. Because, for example, that meme that I showed earlier of the spider being labeled, nope, 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 an actual AZA institution posted that meme. Different image of a spider, but posted that meme. And because of it, like, that is a credible source, like people who take care of animals telling the world spiders are scary and you shouldn't want to conserve them. Whereas the other meme was like, no, it's cute, it's fun, it's exciting, like, go ahead and do that. So we really need to like second guess and analyze ourselves and think about what we're putting out there. So with that, I was gonna try and go faster so there'd be more time for questions if anybody had them. So you can feel free to go in the comment bar and like, what am I saying, the chat, and send me some chats and I'll try to answer questions there. Or if there's a way you guys do questions after presentations, we can do that. But I'd be happy to answer any questions about grad school, about being a zookeeper, whatever you want to ask me.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was awesome. Memes and statistics, a match made in heaven.
You know it.
Awesome. All right, I will stop the live, and then, yeah, everyone, please bring the questions. You can unmute yourself or type them in chat. You guys know what to do.